Tiny Whoopsie, written by Catfish21SM. Whoops is a human word. It signifies that a mistake has been made, and usually that the consequences of said mistake are currently being realized. There is one thing about humans that terrifies other intelligent beings. That is, their whoops. Humans are definitely the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. It didn't used to be that way. They were rather primitive when they first introduced into the Galactic Union, but over several generations they adapted to our technology and began to improve upon it significantly. It's not necessarily true that humans are more intelligent than other species. In fact, some might even argue the opposite is true. Humans are, however, far more daring than other species. They even have a saying for their daringness: act first, ask questions later. It's a saying that encompasses the very nature of humans. This daringness causes humans to, far too often, put their very lives at risk for the purpose of technological improvement. Surprisingly, they often do this for the purpose of living safer and more comfortable lives. They put their lives, sometimes their entire species, at risk to make their lives safer and more comfortable. A living contradiction. The word whoops was learned fairly early when interacting with humans. At first, it was thought to be a mostly harmless word, simply signifying a simple mistake. Observers often found such mistakes to be humorous. "You should have thought that through a little more," were common remarks made towards the word. These were mistakes, like not gripping a cup hard enough so that it slipped and fell and spilled out its contents, or squeezing a semi-solid food package too hard that it burst and got all over the human and their surroundings, or sometimes drinking or touching something that was too hot and getting hurt. Then, one day it happened. The galaxy learned the truly terrifying meaning of the word whoops and many variations. Specifically, the phrase tiny whoopsie has been noted, and the majority of the galaxy has been taught that phrase, tiny whoopsie, is a contradiction, as the phrase is usually used to refer to a mistake that is neither tiny nor is it simple whoopsie. Attached is a manuscript of one of the first known uses of the word tiny whoopsie by a human interacting with another species. For context, the human is the leader of an engineering contractor agency that specialized in development and production of new spaceships, mining stations, and are famous for their constructions of large orbital habitats. They were contracted, in this case, to build a Dyson sphere around a star that would act not only as a massive computer, but a housing structure for an enormous population. "This is Jack. I'm calling to provide a status update on the construction of a mega project." "Great. It should be near completion. What's the progress report? How close are we to ecological testing?" "Well, that's the thing. We may have had a tiny whoopsie in the project." "Okay, that's no big deal. How long will it take to correct?" "Well, correcting it might be a little harder than expected." "Okay. What exactly was the mistake, and how much is it going to cost us moving forward?" "Well, one of our designers accidentally slightly miscalculated the exact strain put on the supports, causing a small cataclysmic failure. Since the project was near completion, most of the mass needed was already in orbit, resulting in the entire structure collapsing into the star and adding mass to create a chain reaction that may or may not have resulted in a black hole forming." "That is, did a black hole form?" "Yes. So, not only is the entire project ruined, but the entire system is uninhabitable, and you've effectively destroyed an entire star." "Yes." We'll end the transcript here, as the language used afterwards is extremely unprofessional, crude, and well-deserved. If you thought this was the biggest whoopsie that humans have ever had, then you should think again. There was also the time that they had a tiny whoopsie which opened a wormhole to another galaxy, with a super-advanced hi-fi species that saw all biological life as food. Thankfully, they could not survive that far away from their queen. There was also the time when the humans caused the complete collapse of a higher dimension, creating a chain reaction that somehow made cartoon characters real for a short period of time. There was the time that they created a new super-intelligent Bob that tried to take over the galaxy. Then there was the time that they tried to kill an evil superintelligence by somehow slinging a miniature black hole at it. Well, even the superintelligence didn't predict this outcome, and it worked. It also increased the mass of the black hole and caused it to shoot off in some unknown direction, at 0.9 the speed of light. It is still out there and could collide with any planet or system at any time, completely obliterating everything that comes even close to it. Don't even get me started on the species of sentient Cheetos. Thankfully, they're, friendly and for some reason like to be eaten, but that's beside the point. Basically, what I'm trying to say is you ever hear a human say the words whoopsie, or especially if you hear them use the phrase tiny whoopsie, then you should immediately shout in terror, tuck your tail between your legs, call your family and say goodbye, then probably flee for your life. Hey, Gartus! Yes, Jack. I was just finalizing a report. What is it now? I may have made a tidy whoopsie. End of recording. Story number 2, Oh Sweet Ancestors, written by TheCurserHasntMoved. Kaz hyperventilated. Oh sure, it's not like he'd done anything wrong, but he knew that if the situation was reversed, he wouldn't care much about the tiny detail either. Not in the face of what things looked like. Oh sure, both the Star Council at large, and Wout in particular, were on good terms with the Terrans. Well, that was between governments. The last saving grace might be if, when the enraged human parents finally caught up with him, they'd spare him long enough to listen to what actually happened. Oh, sweet ancestors, preserve him and his. What did he ever do to deserve this, besides the illegal smuggling and dealing of coffee? It wasn't like it was that bad. Not really. He was almost certain that he was going to die horribly. His crew with him, and his trusty little ship, the White Margin, too. The source of his impending doom lurked in a corner of his ship's galley, swathed in a thick black coat. His green eyes set deep in a pale face, peeking out like emeralds from a bleached skull. At least that was what the Doombringer was going for with this illusion made by the strange black paint the boy had painted around his eyes and the powder caking his face. The effect was spoiled somewhat by the symmetry of the dark spots, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, and the occasional goofy grin playing across his affected skull he was flailing to hold. This stowaway, this underaged stowaway, this underaged runaway stowaway, this underaged runaway stowaway who absolutely refused to just call the giant rage-fueled murder ape who, no doubt, thought their precious little baby had been kidnapped by hardened pirates. They were all going to die. Oh, sweet ancestors. Kaz paced in the galley, alternatively gazed with preparatory sorrow at the dented table bolted to the deck, at the torn booth upholstery repaired with duct tape, at the cabinet latchers shining with polish of long use, and trying to soothe his nerves from grooming his whiskers. It did not help. Then he suddenly stopped and said, "By show of hands, who here would rather face the cops than our stowaway?" The stowaway interrupted with an obviously faked deep bass voice. You can call me Dark Knife. We'll call you Dorkstrife, Vim snapped at Dorkstrife, whose eyes went comically wide as he started to sputter. By show of hands, who would rather be caught by the cops than Dorkstrife's parents? Kaz asked and raised a hand and thwacked his tail on the deck enthusiastically. Vim, Mac, Nib, Dob, Zip, and Red all raised their hands. And they too slapped the deck or their seats with their tails just to show how much they'd rather be arrested, lose the White Margin, and be sent to prison for a decade, than risk the wrath of Dorkstrife's parents. Dorkstrife looked around the galley in opened-mouth horror. It didn't take long for Dorkstrife to gather himself, and he leapt up onto the table, which wobbled threateningly under his weight, and only teetered a little amongst his billowing cloak, and struck what he probably thought was a heroic pose. Where's your sense of adventure? He crowed. When I set out, I waited for days in Temper Station to find the bravest crew. Wait, Zip interrupted. You're from Florida, but with more gators? Kaz had to admit. It was a little funny to watch Dorkstrife's brain attempting to switch gears in the middle of his heroic speech. Yeah? Why? Oh, sweet ancestors, Vim moaned. We're going to die. Not if we get to the cops first, Dob hopefully rejoined. You think that we'll be safe from Florida man and Florida woman in prison? Mac asked despondently. The bravest crew? Dorkstrife continued loudly. Who had the spirit of adventure? Who were out for glory and riches? Just think of all the other smugglers and fat holes that you can pinch just by showing them that you have a Terran warrior on your ship. You're not a warrior. You're a kid too afraid to call his mother, Nib accused as he tugged on his whiskers in despair. Look, Florida man and Florida woman might stay sober enough to listen to the prison guards about how we didn't kidnap their son, Kaz explained. That's a stereotype isn't anywhere close to true, Dogstrife grumped. Everyone glared at him. Well, it's not true, he muttered, as he hunched his shoulders and carefully clambered off the table. So I think our best shot at not dying horribly is to turn ourselves in and serve out a prison term, Kaz explained. Fine, a miserable mound of malformed fashion moaned. I'll call my mom. I'll be grounded forever once she gets her hands on me. Happy? Yes! Everyone bellowed at him. Zip, when can we drop out of hyperzip for a holocall? Kaz asked with tears of joy in his eyes. 10 minutes, he answered. One translation of real space in parking orbit around what looked like a very nice colony world later, and the shared holodesk in the ship's office was playing the call waiting tune while Doglife pouted in front of it with his arms crossed. Then the display flickered as the music cut, and the torso of a woman with a severe, angular face with hard emerald eyes and an iron in her rounded feminine features is accentuated by the Republican Navy duty uniform she wore. The Republican Navy duty uniform with stars on its shoulders. Derek, there you are. Your father and I have been worried sick since your Auntie Judy said you went missing. Hi, Mom. I'm fine. I made some friends, the boy mumbled at his knees. Oh, sweet ancestors. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.